Another member of Congress, when we were voting for this, I said, why are you voting for this? You haven't even had a chance to review it. We only had 1 hour. And he said, well, how can I vote against the Patriot Act? How can I go home, and tell people I voted against the Patriot Act? And I said, there's a lot of bad stuff in it. He says, well, I know that. He says, but how can I explain it to him at home? I said, well, that's your job. Go home and explain it to him. If that bill would have been called Repeal the Fourth Amendment Act, then I had a lot harder time passing. And that's essentially what it was. But it hasn't gotten much better over this last decade. Personal liberties were too careless, and that's why this movement, this freedom movement, is so crucial. We need to reverse this attitude that we can just allow governments to codify now some of the terrible things they had been doing all along. The governments have been acting outside the law, but at least they knew that we would object, and they kept it quiet, and they did it secretly, and they'd used the CIA to overthrow governments and a lot of other things that they shouldn't have been doing. But now, what have they done? The president, a year ago, he announced that it is proper policy and official policy of the United States government for the president to make a decision to assassinate American citizens. Without charges or without a trial. He's tested it and it's been done 3 times. So it's that principle that counts. Why do we have trials for bad people? To make sure that we're never subject to those kind of trials for political reasons. But we give trials, after World War II, the Nazi war criminals were given trial. Adolf Eichmann, even years later when he was arrested, was taken to Israel, he was given a trial. Timothy McVeigh, he was a pretty bad guy. I mean, they just say, oh, you're a bad guy, you don't deserve a trial. But that is what has been accepted. And yet, if you don't think it's a trend, just this past month, they came on the National Defense Authorization Act. The National Defense Authorization Act has literally codified and said openly that the military can arrest any American citizen because you're a suspect. And that wasn't bad enough. What else they said was, you definitely don't get an attorney. You are denied an attorney. You are put away indefinitely in a prison, which could be overseas. Now, they put that down in black and white. So that should alert us to, the crisis that we're facing. And it all can be solved by understanding the Declaration of Independence and our Constitution that... liberty come in a natural way or a God-given way, and if our life and liberty comes in that manner, the government can't take it away, can't take our rights away. And if we believe that the government has the authority to be arbitrary in enforcing these laws, then we're in big trouble. But the government's role should be very minor, that is to protect liberty, not to be able to undermine what is naturally ours. Atmosphere exists, it carries over into the domestic scene as well. I detest all these wars, especially since they're unnecessary and dangerous and unconstitutional and unwinnable for a few reasons. But the other war that's going on that we have to address is going on for about, in a significant manner, for about 40 years, and that's the war on drugs. That's unwinnable, and we should cancel it. History, a lot of well-motivated individuals discovered that alcohol can be dangerous. And I agree, alcohol is a very dangerous drug. Matter of fact, it's a lot more dangerous than some of the drugs that are on illegal lists right now. But the alcohol, there was a consensus. At least can you imagine them going through and amending the Constitution to pursue the drug war now? No, they just do it. But back then, they wanted to prohibit alcohol. They at least respected the Constitution. Well, we have to amend the Constitution. And it turned out to be a total disaster. After 1 decade, they chucked it. They said it isn't worth it. The crime related to alcohol and the sale of alcohol, and there was no decrease in the use of alcohol. So this is the reason that prohibition prohibition doesn't work, and we have to take care of these problems in another manner. Drugs are very dangerous, but there's a lot of dangers in this country and in the world. And whose number one responsibility is it? It's the parents to teach your kids what are dangerous. We teach them that. The main reason it undermines personal liberty is it's used to once again violate due process of law and the Fourth Amendment. The operations when the police come or the FBI come and these SWAT teams come in, they don't always go into the right houses. Sometimes they go into the wrong houses. Some people get killed over this. But as a physician and somebody involved in politics, I think we should treat the drug problem, which is a serious problem, treat it more like we treat alcoholism. What if we put all the alcoholics in prison and said you're a criminal? I mean, nobody wants to do that. That's because they still drink a lot of alcohol over in Washington, D.C. Every reason to believe that something big is going on. The economic crisis is going to demand changes. The failure of our foreign policy brought down all great empires when they overextend themselves. That is coming to an end. Personal liberties here. We'll have to make decisions whether we can stand watching on TV pictures of the TSAs prodding and probing and us complacently obeying to this without saying anything. So we are at a crisis point, but fortunately, the liberty movement is alive and well, and that's what excites me. As discouraging as it is to be in Washington and listening to the politicians there, which I had suggested the other day that maybe we should send a few of them to the moon. There's a lot of encouragement around the country. When I come to the college campuses and the young people are saying enough is enough, and we want our lives back, we want our liberty back, and we will assume responsibility for ourselves. We don't believe in the welfare transfer system, and we don't believe in the warfare that is going to promote American goodness around the world. If we want to promote American goodness around the world, which isn't a bad idea because there's still a lot of goodness in America, the only way you can do it is set a good example and get other people to want to emulate us. A lot of people are coming alive with this. I'm especially encouraged by the younger generation, but I'm encouraged with others who have not been involved in politics. They dropped out a long time ago. They knew and understood this, but they felt like their numbers were so small. But because the younger generation is coming alive, those who have set aside these and had given up, they're coming back into the fold, and they understood it. They were just too frustrated. So there's a large number of people. There is truly an intellectual revolution going on in this country, and I'm glad I can participate. Admonition that we should have, a free society, and people make up their own minds what they want to do with their life and with their liberty because they're afraid they might misuse it. Sure, they might misuse their money, but that doesn't justify socialism. They might misuse their social values and mess up their lives. But the whole thing is, if you legalize freedom, you don't legalize everything people do with their freedom. We don't, if freedom of religion is legal, and we don't tell people what they have to believe, some people will be non-believers and some people will believe things that seem rather absurd. But we don't have to make that judgment. Legalizing freedom doesn't mean that you endorse what people do. That means we all should come together to endorse freedom, not what we do with our own freedom. About a free society society, you want to change and mold society, but you do it through persuasion and not by force, and through excellent education. I believe one of the personal goals that I would like to maintain, and I think others do, and that is if you want to seek virtue and excellence, which would be a noble goal, you can't let government get participating in that. The politicians and the bureaucrats don't know anything about virtue and excellence. They simply want that. Society, when the government officials decide they want to do it, they only do it at the expense of liberty. But we are now facing a major crisis. There's every reason to be optimistic. Freedom had been best tried here. We had the greatest success, the largest middle class, the wealthiest middle class, and yet it's gone by its way. We don't have sound money, we don't have free markets, we don't have property rights, we don't have personal liberty. But we knew what it was like. We have a record to go back to. We don't have to invent it. It's not quite as difficult as other nations. When they break down, they don't quite have our traditions. But it won't come easily because there's still a lot of powerful special interests that rule Washington. This is what we've turned it over to be. Once the government could divvy up the loot that they take, it just encouraged all the special interests and the lobbyists. They're in charge. We have to challenge them, and we have to defend this, and it has to be a moral cause as much as anything. We have a moral right to our life and our liberty, and we have a moral obligation not to tell other people what they want to do with their life and liberty. Against what would happen. The founders made a very specific point. They didn't like pure democracy because that became a dictatorship and rights became arbitrary. And they wanted a republic, but they said they worried that it would change. And I believe we have morphed into the dictatorship of the majority, and therefore rights are relative and the minority is not protected. So if you're in the minority and you believe in true liberty, you're under attack by the majority who wants to control your life. But John Adams said that what happens when you have pure democracy, it wastes and it exhausts and then it murders itself. And if we continue to be neglectful, that's what we're going to do. We're going to murder our liberties. We're going to exhaust ourselves physically and economically. And then the authoritarians can pick up the pieces. The question is, are we going to allow that to happen, or are we going to insist on the traditions of America, understand what true liberty is all about, and get our freedoms back once again? That is what I stand for. That is what I argue for. That is what I campaign for. And I welcome you in this effort to restore liberty to America. Thank you.
Dr. and Mrs. 55th anniversary.